very happy to have on the program Jason Jones. And it's going to take me like 10 minutes to read everything you've accomplished, Jason. So I'm going to shorten it up a little bit. But film producer, author, activist, podcast host of the Jason Jones Show, president of the Human Rights Education and Relief Organization, also known as HERO. You're also known for two main programs, Movie to Movement, which we've had you on the show to talk about before, and the Vulnerable People Project. You are the author of a book that just came out. It is called The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset. And I'm very pleased to have you back on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me back on, Vicki.
Hope I didn't shorten it too much.
No, it was too long already. Too long already. The longer the bio, the less accomplishments of the guest, I'm guessing, in life. That's how it works.
Well, not true. Not in your case. So
like if you had on President Trump, you'd say Donald Trump, President Trump. But you have me on, you have to read these two paragraphs. I apologize.
Not even. I want to talk about the book. I want to talk about the way out. Is there a way out of this? And in the course of the past 2 days, because of what Joe Biden did to attempt to hijack Easter by replacing the resurrection with a story of transgender visibility, we've been talking about the repaganization, both with a friend of mine, Dr. Duke Peston, just recently with John Daniel Davidson. We've already seen what it looks like. Your book actually says you can take a look at some places and you can see what your life is going to be like. China, for instance, or some other places that where you target vulnerable people, where you go to try to help vulnerable people. So let's talk about that. What happens when we run Christ, the concept, the belief, just the culture out of the West? What does our day-to-day life kind of look like?
Yeah, well, Vicki, I think that, by the way, happy second day on the octave of Transgender Visibility Week.
Thank you. I've got my transgender visibility eggs still out, and my transgender visibility crucifix as well, still out.
Yeah, I wonder if a mammal comes out of the egg. So I think that's the perfect example, though, of what's happening. It's not, it's not just about politics. It's not just about governance and economics, and that's what most people think about when they think about the Great Reset. But what it really is about, it's about anthropology. It's about a different vision of the human person. We live in the West. The West is a civilization that was knit together around a fundamental principle, which was actually put into one of our founding documents, the Declaration Principle. And it's a vision of the human person as a creature made in the image and likeness of God with an inviolable dignity and worth. So when you hear Klaus Schwab say you're going to eat cricket meat and like it, you're going to own nothing and like it, we're going to chalk the sky, we're going to blow up Antarctica, all these sort of grand schemes that they have to re-engineer the world, what they're really trying to do is re-engineer the human person. And so I was the first person in the world, or at least in North America, arrested leading an anti-lockdown protest. It was on the first day of the first COVID lockdown. Ended up on the cover of Drudge Report, ended up in handcuffs in newspapers around the world. My picture was above the fold. And my wife said this was, I've made her very proud. But, in my work with the Vulnerable People Project, I've worked in Iraq, Sudan, Afghanistan. It really struck me that what we fear that's going to come for us has already arrived for those communities that we serve. For example, the 3 million Uyghur in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan that work to death in concentration camps until their organs are needed for harvesting, and then they're harvested. This sounds unbelievable to probably a lot of your listeners, but just Google Uyghur organ harvesting. It's the truth. Or you look at the electric vehicle boondoggle, which more than just being a scam that gives a consumer a car that, the internal combustion and it pales in comparison to the internal combustion engine. The fact is that green car was birthed in the cobalt mines in Congo, where children are working to death in slave labor conditions, not slave labor-like conditions, but they're working in toxic muck in slave labor conditions to produce the cobalt that is in every single electric vehicle in the world. There is not an electric vehicle in the world that does not have cobalt from Congo that was shoveled out by hand by children. And so the Great Reset, it's violent, it's tyrannical, it's inhumane. And in my book, I list the 5 sort of organizations of control that the globalists use to dominate society and to re-engineer society, and then the 5 the foundational principles of the West that we just need to advocate and advance in order to break the back of the Great Reset.
So I want to talk about that. We could go down any COVID, whatever, but just Uyghurs or the kids in the cobalt mines, as young as 6, by the way, in dying in slave labor, so that we can have cool smartphones and electric vehicles. But it's that we're kind of okay with it in the West. I want to kind of just go down that road just for a little bit. We're kind of okay with that. So we've already seen the sort of moral structure of Western civilization that was predicated on the principles of Christianity weak into that. I mean, we like our stuff more than we care about 6-year-old kids, taking their last breath in the muck of a cobalt mine.
Can you imagine? Yeah, what's the core principle of the Great Reset and of globalists is victimism.
Don't care. Yeah, and don't care about it. By all means, there are some people who are better than others and more worthy than others. So if a couple of million, little brown children have to be put to death so that you can have your cool EV, we should have a moral reckoning with the way we have designed our economy to be dependent on the death and slavery of others.
Yeah, exactly. I was arrested actually when I led the anti-lockdown rally. It was protesting the famine that we would cause around the world because of if we slowed down. Now, this was leading into the lockdown. Slowing down the production, processing, and distribution of food would push those on the brink of starvation into starvation, those on the brink of hunger into hunger, and that's exactly what happened. The COVID policy led to the worst famine since World War II, but it wasn't covered in the media. What was covered is Zoom fatigue. Oh no, I've run out of shows to binge watch on Netflix, and I'm so tired of Zoom meetings, and am I going to have to Uber eat Chick-fil-A again another day? But victimism is the mechanism of control. It's where they feign concern for the vulnerable for wealth and power. So, for example, the climate catastrophe, what they call it, quote unquote, this is about controlling energy around the world, energy production, energy distribution. And so when you hear them say they want a coal-free world by 2030, they are condemning Central Asia to death by exposure in the winter. My organization, the Vulnerable People Project, in the past 3 years has delivered 100 million hours of heat through coal and other fuel to the poorest, to the widows and orphans of our Afghan allies who are killed in action to keep them alive through the winters. We get condemned by this, by the climate occultists saying that we're destroying the planet Earth because we're giving the poorest people in the world a little bit of coal to survive the winter. King Charles in his Christmas address said, "We should not let war and famine distract us from compassion for the climate." That is peak victimism. Turn your back on those dying from starvation. Turn your back on those working to death in Chinese slave labor camps, but have this vague, warm, fuzzy feeling that you love the environment because what? I don't know. You say you
Makes
do.
You feel better for doing nothing. You can do nothing
you
and feel really good about yourself. That's what it is. It's subbing out. In the West, it's subbing out our sort of general and collective responsibility to be decent, to be decent moral nations, and subbing it out for just platitudes and warm fuzzies on Twitter.
Well, let's go to, victimism. The proper response to victimism is authentic solidarity with those who are vulnerable. That's the way out of the Great Reset. But to do that, J.K. Rowling just, put herself up to spend 7 years in prison because she said, "I refuse to pretend a boy is a girl and a girl is a boy." And they said in Scotland, "Well, we'll put you to prison for 7 years." You look at Enes Kanter Freedom, the great NBA basketball player who lost his career because in the midst of the Black Lives Matter charade, he dared to wear shoes that said Uyghurs' lives matter, free Hong Kong. You had NBA players go to meet Pope Francis, so you had millionaires with the billionaire owners meeting Pope Francis while wearing Nike. The NBA had no problem censoring those who advocated for the slaves that work picking cotton for Nike shirts. So you had NBA players wearing jerseys that had Uyghur cotton in them. This is a fact. Uyghur cotton in those products, kneeling at the national anthem, being celebrated for it. And then you had a Turkish Muslim NBA player dare to wear a shirt standing up to the exploitation of Uyghur slave labor, and he gets kicked out of the NBA. And so that's where we stand. So what is the way out of the Great Reset? It's radical Christian solidarity with those who are vulnerable. It's telling the truth about the human person, that we are made in the image and likeness of God and have an incomparable dignity, beauty, and worth. It is piety towards the things that men and women were created to be pious towards, and turning our backs on the gods of the city. The way out of the Great Reset is to love God, love your parents, love your neighbor. Young people, you are listening, preserve your moral imagination so you can experience erotic love appropriately, fall in love, get married, have children, then order your lives to your children and your posterity. This is a very simple but challenging path out of the Great Reset. Promote human dignity, promote the natural law that stands above public opinion and Twitter mobs and governments, promote solidarity. We should break the back of the World Economic Forum and other distant, unelected bureaucracies that seek to control us. We should promote private property rights, and we should live lives of solidarity with the vulnerable. And this is how we break the back of the Great Reset.
I don't think I could sum it up better. I also want to recommend that people get your book, The Great Campaign Against the Great Reset by Jason Jones. By the way, you can also see Jason frequently at stream.org. Frequently, you actually collaborate with a friend of mine, John Smirak, and those columns you guys put together are always marvelous, always worth reading. And thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
You know what? I love Wisconsin, and I worked in Wisconsin for a couple of years, and so just being there, I want cheese curds and beer. You know, I'm going to have to go get some cheese curds and beer right now.
All right, you're welcome back anytime. Hey, Jason, thank you so much.
God bless you. Aloha.
You as well. We will take a break. Thanks as well to Middleton Ford for sponsoring our hotline. Family owned and your good neighbor Ford dealership for nearly 75 years. We'll be right back. And just a couple of minutes left. Sean, what is are there any accidents on the Beltline? Anything we need to report to people traffic-wise going home tonight, or swinging by their polling locations?
Yeah, so we still do have Highway 14, and it's backed up actually from almost the Beltline through that accident we have right south of 138, just south of Oregon. Looks like a pretty serious one. Beltline, you're probably seeing this too, is all red, both east and westbound. Interstate looks a little bit better if that helps any.
So slow traffic. I don't think we have accidents on the Beltline, but we do have an accident that is backing up Highway 14 all the way, you say, to the Beltline?
All the way to the Beltline. It's at a standstill.
How many miles is that?
That's a good question.
That's miles.
That is. Oh, it's bad.
That is miles. There is an accident in Oregon. For those of you stuck on 14, that is why the traffic is moving as slowly as it is. Polls are open till 8 p.m. tonight, 8 p.m. So drive carefully, but if you have not voted absentee, please go to the polls. At minimally, vote yes on the constitutional questions. And I'm hoping for the best, but weather is bad across Wisconsin. It's not just Dane County. It's all the way, up north of Green Bay. So I wonder how that is potentially affecting Trump's visit tonight in the Green Bay area. Already at capacity for the crowd. So we'll get a report on that tomorrow. Everybody be safe. We'll see you on tomorrow's program.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.